Valerie, I think everyone is in. We can go ahead and start.
Okay, sounds good. I know we always have more people will show up as we go through. So welcome everyone to our joint program today. This is DHHS and the PTO working together to bring you a great program about IB and understanding what IB means and what it can mean for your student. And let me introduce who will be presenting to you tonight. So we have Brett Flater and Ann Bracewell, who are the IB co-coordinators for Druid Hills High. And then we're also very fortunate to have two students with us, Nathaniel Green and Ellie Harmon, who are in the IB program, and they are both seniors, I believe is correct. So they'll be here to answer questions as well. So the way it's going to happen is that Brett is going to go through a presentation, and he had all your questions ahead of time that you sent. So thank you very much for doing that, and has tried to address all of those through the presentation. But then once we are done, we will have a Q&A period. So if there are any additional questions you have, you'll be able to ask those. But we please ask that you do that through the chat. And then I will relay those to Brett. So, or whoever needs to get them relayed to. So with that, I think we can get started.
Great. Thanks so much, Valerie. And thank you to you all for taking time out. I know being a parent myself, finding an hour in the evening after work is challenging. So I appreciate those of you being here and those of you observing and watching it recorded. Thank you. As Valerie said, my name is Brett Flater. I'm one of the two co-coordinators of the IB program here. Ann Bracewell is also here. Ann, do you want to say hey real quickly? She may pop in just a second. So we're both here, and then we're really excited to have Ellie and Nathaniel here. So
all right, I'm here. Yeah,
perfect. No worries.
give me a minute to unmute it. So okay.
All good.
Hi.
So we really have two main objectives here today. There's going to be a lot of information that we share with you. We don't expect you to understand it all or to process it all, but really my goal is that you leave with a better understanding of what makes IB unique, and that by doing so, you become a little bit better equipped to understand whether or not this might be a good fit for you or not, and for your family. So hopefully we achieve those two things. So I want to start by giving a super quick overview of what IB, or International Baccalaureate, is in general. And I want to give credit to Casey here. They're a great nonprofit that we partner with that really supports the promotion and the advancement of international education. And I think it's easy to think of IB as just Druid Hills High School, but that misses the fact that IB is actually a K through 12 continuum. And so in both, at the very bottom, you see the program, or I'm sorry, the primary years program. That's in the elementary schools. That is whole school. So all students who are attending a PYP or an IB elementary school are IB students. In the middle years program, again, it's a whole school program. So all students in 6th through 8th grade are IB students. And so we're really fortunate at Druid Hills High School that a lot of our students have been IB students from pre-K all the way through 8th grade. And then the difference really begins here in high school. Here at Druid Hills High School, we have the diploma program. Tucker High School has a career-related program. And so it really is a continuation of programs throughout K through 12th grade. In Dekalb County, we're really lucky that we have 3 clusters. You see at the very bottom, Region 5 is our MLK Junior High School cluster. On the top right, you see our Tucker High School cluster. And then on the left here, you see the Druid Hills High School cluster. And as I mentioned, we're really fortunate here at Druid Hills High School. We have a great cluster that has IB in 3 of our elementary schools, Fernbank, International Community, Avondale. You see our feeder middle school program, Druid Hills Middle School is an IB school. And so many of our students who arrive at Druid Hills High School have been IB students from K through 8. So we're really excited about that. You can also see the Tucker High School cluster, elementary, middle, and at the high school. Again, they have a career program, which we won't go into, but we're happy to talk with you at some other point. And then you see Martin Luther King Jr. has a middle years program and a diploma program. So Dekalb County has invested in the IB program. And I mean, I think the fundamental question is why? What makes IB unique and what's the value of IB? And so I want to focus on three things in the time that I have today. The first is the IB learner profile. These are the characteristics that are going to help your students succeed in the IB program. The second is the approaches to teaching. These are what students will be seeing in the IB classrooms. And the third is the approaches to learning, really what students should be learning in the IB class. And again, I think it's really exciting. Many of our students have seen these things kindergarten through 8th grade. So let's start with the learner profile. I think it really feeds nicely into our approaches to teaching and our approaches to learning. And one of the things I hope you take away today is that what makes IB unique is that it is a full program that really reinforces and supports all aspects of itself. So IB learner profile. I really think that if you wanted to, you could begin and end your understanding with the IB learner profile characteristics. In a lot of my meetings with students, with parents, with community members, I really begin here because these are the characteristics that IB has said students should either already possess that will lead them to success, or these are skills that your students really are interested in learning and developing, understanding that those are skills that are going to help them achieve success. So there are 12 of them. We'll send this out so that you can read them in more detail. They're up in our classrooms. They're one of my big things that we do with juniors when they're first in my classroom is we go over these. But I did want to pull out a few of them because I think they do highlight both what makes IB unique as well as some key things that really highlight who IB is for. The other thing I want to say before we go into this is I think there's this misperception that IB is only for a select group of students, that, you know, only a small group of students can succeed. And I think what we see as we go back to these learner profile characteristics, none of them say that students are the brightest students. None of these say that students can only do school. And so hopefully what you see as you look at these is that IB is for all students, and that there is nothing unique that would prevent a student from being successful in IB. So the first thing I want to talk about is risk takers. I think one of the things that's valuable about IB, and to be honest, the reason that I fell in love with the IB program is because IB values not just the outcome, not just what is learned, but IB really values the process of learning. And as adults, I think we know that the process of learning is an ongoing process. It's not just something that happens once we come up with an answer. My wife would tell you that many of my best lessons are after I've come up with an answer and she tells me why that answer was wrong. So being a risk taker, I think, is really crucial here. IB learners are individuals who are comfortable in uncertainty and ambiguity. One of the things we see is that a lot of IB students have been really successful in school up until this point. I like to say they've learned how to play the game of school. They've learned what the answer is, how the teacher wants the answer, and they're really good at providing that. But what IB does is it really challenges students to not just come up with the answer. And so what happens is that there is a lot of ambiguity. A lot of the questions that teachers are asked or the tasks that students are presented with, there's not one right answer. In fact, a lot of times I'll tell my students, I don't know what the answer is. You help me find the answer. And so if your student is really uncomfortable with there not being one answer, or if your student really struggles when they don't know exactly what the answer is, you might want to think about this idea of being a risk taker. I highlighted that students are resourceful and resilient. A lot of times students will ask us for the answers and we'll say, go and find it, figure it out. And that's not a dismissive, flippant response. It is a genuine reflection of the fact that IB is about the process of learning as much as it is about what is actually learned. I think that ties really nicely into the next idea, which is that learners are reflective. The IB students thoughtfully consider their experience, they understand their strengths, they understand their weaknesses. And there's a few things I really want to highlight, and I want to clearly communicate to you all as parents tonight. The first is that students are actively working to understand their strengths and their weaknesses, that this is something that is ongoing. This means that students, and yes, this means that you as parents need to acknowledge that students are going to have things that they're great in, and that they're going to have things that maybe they're not as great or not as developed in. And again, I think we see a lot of students are super successful and have all straight A's. And so parents and students start to struggle the first time that they don't get a 98% on something. And that is innate in the process of learning for IB, that students really are actively thinking about what am I good at process-wise, content-wise, what am I not good at? And that evaluation then leads to additional learning. How can I get better? Why did I not get this correct? Why did I maybe do poorly on this exam? And what can I learn from that process moving forward? The other thing I want to acknowledge is that this means that students are thoughtfully reflecting. Reflection oftentimes in school is a checkbox where students just describe what they did. And IB really encourages reflective students to engage in meaningful reflection, not just check a box. The third thing I really want to highlight, and some of your questions were about this, I think the biggest thing we hear about IB is my child doesn't want to do IB because they can only do school. They can't do sports, they can't work, they can't have friends or social life. And I want to highlight that this sentiment is fundamentally antithetical to the values that are held by IB. That IB calls out that students and parents understand that a balanced student is a strong student. And this means that there is a balance between intellectual and school, a balance between physical and sports and activity, and a balance with emotional and social learning. Now, I want to be clear that this doesn't mean that students have the skills to do this perfectly. I think a lot of us adults still really struggle at times to figure out how do we balance everything. But it does really highlight that a key component of being in IB is learning how to balance. Sometimes we're going to have to do a lot of schoolwork. Sometimes we're going to make the decision to deprioritize school right now because we're going to focus on sports. And those are skills that we learn and that students learn in IB. That does not mean that IB is not rigorous. It doesn't mean that there's a lot of work, but it does acknowledge that learning how to do and balance things is a key component of what students will do. There's other important aspects of the learner profile characteristic. Our students are inquirers, and I really pulled out that there is a love of learning. We want students who are innately motivated to learn and who really enjoy the process of learning. That doesn't mean that they've loved school. In fact, some of our students get so bored in school because it's so rote, memorized. And what they find is that in IB, they actually develop a love of school because of a process they haven't gone through before. But I do think it's really important to highlight that if your student is not motivated, if your student is doing IB because you want them to do it, it's going to be really challenging. If your student or you think that IB is a golden ticket to Georgia Tech or UGA, and that is their motivation, your student is really going to struggle because at its core, IB students are inquirers who have enthusiasm and a sustained love of learning. IB students are often also thinkers. We use critical and creative thinking. They're communicators. They express themselves confidently. They're okay going up to teachers and sharing their thoughts, either in small groups, individually, or as a whole. And they're principled, that fundamentally international mindedness and the International Baccalaureate program is about developing well-balanced, principled individuals who take responsibilities for our actions and their consequences. So I could go on, I could do an entire hour-long presentation. The students who will speak will say yes, that we know, right, Ellie? But I'm happy to talk more with you all about that later. The next thing that really makes IB unique is the approaches to teaching. And some of these are a little in the weeds for us as teachers. But what I want to highlight here is that these approaches to teaching are not necessarily things that are unique, are hyper specific to IB. These are things that honestly are just good teaching. And I think when we look at what K through 8 students have seen throughout their school, is that these are things that have happened. So the first thing is that IB instruction is based off of inquiry. And I do think this is unique. Again, going back to this idea of a lot of school leading up to this is, here's the information to learn it, give it back to me. That is not IB. IB presents problems and challenges and says, go, help us figure out how do we solve this. And so that inquiry-based approach is vital to a classroom. Secondly, it's focused on conceptual understanding. We don't focus on memorizing the 27 amendments. We focus on what does the process of amending fundamental laws mean. And through that conceptual understanding, we can then make meaning out of specific pieces of information. The way I always like to think of it is that the concept is the cloud that allows the pieces of information to really stick in our students' brains. The third thing is unique to IB. I think this idea of being internationally minded means that we are really learning in local context, but also that we're focusing on global aspects. So every class, math, science, history, we are going to learn both locally and we're going to develop that global understanding and trying to understand other perspectives. Finally, this idea of collaboration, differentiation, this idea of being formed by assessment, those are all things that our teachers really focus on. And as we provide professional development to our teachers, these are the things we're working on. So all of that sounds great. It's very theoretical. What's it look like in the classroom? So let me give you two real life examples. The first is in math, and I chose math because many people think math is do problems, memorize, solve the answers, or solve for the answers. But in IB, it's very different. So I was talking with our math teacher, Mr. Patel, and he said, Brett, I was really thinking about this question, and we started off our conversation with it, right? Math is often used to map the world around us. And the question is it naturally organized mathematically, or have we created math? Or in other words, is math created or discovered? And so what some students are doing in their internal assessment is they're coming up with a real world situation. They're using inquiry to really apply their knowledge of statistical mathematics. So some students are looking at sports and trying to predict what might happen based off of statistics, or if in volleyball we get a certain number of points before the first team, does that mean that we're more likely to win? And they create a hypothesis based off of what math would say, and then they look at the real results. And then they reflect and they say, did the mathematical results really play out in the real world? And I think a lot of us will say, of course not, right? The world is complex. And so then the learning happens. Why did it not happen? Was there a flaw in the application of the math? Did we not understand the mathematical concepts clearly enough? Or was math not the right appropriate thing here? And so I think you can start to see, even if this is a little abstract, you can start to see that math is not something that we use numerically. It is something that we use inquiry-based in order to apply to real-world situations. The second example is what it looks like in the classroom in history and in English. And I pulled this because one of the things that I think makes IB unique is this idea that it's interdisciplinary, or in other words, this approach is something that students see in all of their classes. And what that leads to is some really great combination of lessons. So our senior history and language teacher, in history, they were studying apartheid in South Africa. In English, they read Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, and they were given this task to organize images and documents in a way that visually demonstrated the key concepts from the unit. So here's an example of what one group created. And what I want you to see from this is that the final product that is produced here is something that was created by the students. All of the students were given the same information, but how that information was organized and curated and put together was different by each group. The other thing I want you to see is that the learning didn't stop with this final product, that what happened afterwards was a reflective process where students thought about why did you organize things the way you did? Evaluating other students. How did Ellie's presentation of the information differ from Nathaniel's? What can we learn from Nathaniel's that we can't from Ellie, and vice versa? And so this interactive, collaborative, inquiry-based, creative process really is what students are doing in IB. And I want to pull out that that is not an intellectual, only the best of the best can do. All of our students are capable of doing creative thinking that is conceptually and inquiry based. And that's what really gets us excited. The last thing, and I've talked for too long already, I do that. The last thing is this approaches to learning. So these essentially are, what are our students learning and what types of skills? And again, these are things that our students who have been in IB schools from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade are really familiar with. Thinking skills, communication skills, social skills, self-management skills. This focus on research is a big thing. And what I hope you see here in this visual is that these skills are directly related to our learner profile characteristics. When they're developing their thinking skills, they're building those inquirer, knowledgeable, and thinker characteristics. When they're developing their communication skills, they're becoming communicators, they're reflecting, they're working collaboratively. When they develop those social skills, they're becoming more caring, more principled, more open-minded individuals. And when they're working on those self-management skills, they're becoming more balanced individuals and they're learning how to take risks. So those are really the three key components that make IB unique. A couple of other unique aspects is the first is a course called Theory of Knowledge. It is the course I teach. It is what got me to love IB. Theory of Knowledge is at the core of the IB program because it teaches students to think differently. I basically tell students, my job is to unteach you 10 years of education so that you can start thinking for yourselves and thinking critically. And so they take that course both their junior and senior year. The second thing is that students do an independent 4,000 word maximum research essay. Think of this as sort of a practice thesis. So students need to complete that outside of class with support of a supervisor. There's creativity, activity, and service. This is where students have an opportunity to take their learning outside of the classroom, demonstrate those characteristics, not just in the classroom, but outside. There's also additional world language requirements. This idea of being internationally minded recognizes that at the heart of that is deeply understanding world languages. And so students have to take not only 4 years of foreign language, but then they take an IB foreign language. And then lastly, most courses stretch over a 2-year period. And I'll show you what that looks like later on. But here we see this is what the IB diploma program is. At the core, you see the learner profile, which we've talked about. Then you see the approaches to teaching and the approaches to learning. This is what they have in all courses. You have those extended components I just touched on. And then there are 6 courses that your students take: science, language and literature, which is English essentially, individuals and societies, which is history, math, and then there is an arts option, which is an elective, which we'll get to. So I am really good at teaching because I can talk forever, but what you really want to hear from is from the students. And so I'm really thrilled that Ellie and Nathaniel have joined us. I want to highlight two things that may sound contradictory. Ellie and Nathaniel are amazing and wonderful and fantastic representatives. I think they'll talk to you directly and show you that you can do many things. I also want to say, and I hope I don't offend you all, they're not unique, right? That they represent the differences and that lots of students do lots of different things. We did not pick only the two students who do everything. Lots of our IB students are doing lots of things, but they are amazing and special. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ellie and Nathaniel. We'd love to hear from you all on your perspective and tell them all of the great things you know.
Sure, I'll go first. Hi everyone, my name is Ellie. I've been obviously doing IB through 11th and 12th grade. And obviously there is a bunch of stuff up here that I have been doing. And I think it's kind of important to note, at least for me, that I really didn't, this is a large list, but most of it, most of the clubs and the involvement that I've done, all of my time that I've worked, had a job or taken extra classes after school, most of it has been while I'm in IB. So it was not a limiting factor on my life at all. It actually, I've noticed, like Mr. Plater said, a lot more engagement with school since I've started the IB program. I definitely used to be the type of kid who could sleep through class or not pay attention and get all A's. And that's not what IB is for me. I think also it's really important to note that time management, things like that, they're definitely a challenge, but you learn it through IB a little bit. Like if you're thrown in the deep end of a swimming pool and then suddenly you'll notice that you just start swimming and you get really, really far and you become able to do things that I never would have thought I could do. Personally, I've been I've talked about this with Mr. Flater. I'll do my homework while I'm at work. I'll sit down at a table when we're not busy and just do some homework or write my EE. I've been able to do a lot of really amazing things with the program. And I've totally become that type of annoying person who connects everything in my life to school because it all connects so well. Anytime I'll have a conversation, I might just go in, oh, we were just talking about that. Or oh, let me talk about this crazy thing that I also just learned about that connects super well. And I really enjoy that. I don't know how all of my friends feel about it, but for me, it's great. I think it's important as parents, because this is geared towards the parents today, that you really focus on working with your IB student. You guys are a team and you're going to notice that things start changing, especially towards the beginning of the junior year. It's very stressful. It's sort of hard to manage everything. And it's a process. I know personally I've had conversations with my parents where they're like, hey, what's going on? You're failing math. What's happening? When I had an 87, far from failing. And things like that. It's just a little bit, you kind of have to expect changes between how your students always been or what your definition of success and failure is and this new reality. I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I guess I'll turn it over to Nathaniel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nathaniel Green, and like Ellie, I've also been in the IB program for the past 2 years now, finishing up 12th grade. And I too I struggled with IB at first. Like Mr. Flater kind of talked about, it was a big shift from regular school, I guess. I was one of those kids that was used to there being one problem into everything being easy to find and just the standard structure of school. And so I really appreciate the fact that IB has kind of shifted my perspective and has taught me to, figure out things And with IB in most classes, there really is no right answer in most cases. And you provide an answer to a question and you're able to explain it, then acceptable. And I've grown to really love that, as it like produces a variety of different answers, and you really get to connect with others and learn like, oh, why do they think differently than you? And I really, really enjoy it. And I do have some friends who I don't think would be able to adapt to that and be able to accept that there is not a right answer in these classes and stuff. And that's why I don't really think IB is for everyone. Definitely, I was able to change, and to be honest, I know I could, but I appreciate the fact that it has taught me to just think critically about things. And I guess it has taught me to love learning, and it's taught me to learn how to learn on my own and not just to rely on what the teachers say and how they answer questions, but to pursue my studies on my own as well. And I think definitely, like Ellie said, there were challenges with the grades and stuff. Fortunately, last year I maintained plays, and that was a struggle for me. And I think if I wasn't able to, I would have reacted kind of harshly, perhaps like Ellie's parents did. And if I had a B or something, I would have been like, oh no, we're worse than that. And this year, I started the school year with 2 Bs, 2 low Bs, because I was this year with football, club soccer, and IB. It was just, but the things that took up most of my time were not IB, but things outside of school. And so those were commitments that were not related to school that I chose to partake in, that really did take up most of my time. So I think IB taught me to realize that the grades were not the most important thing, and taught me to like, I feel like I've grown where like, oh no, I don't have an A, where it's, am I learning? Am I getting better? Is my grade improving? And that's the most important thing. And last year, I would not have been able to accept that. This year. And yeah, oh, again, one other thing is that IB is really its own little family, I think. It allows you to develop close relationships with students, which I've also loved. Like Ellie, I knew her before IB, but I wasn't like friends with her. But now I consider her a good friend. And pretty much everyone else in IB, IB really forces you to collaborate and work with them at least once along your journey in IB, I guess. And I really have loved that throughout my time here. And on the flip side, you don't get to see other friends as much that aren't in IB, which was pretty hard at first. And you do have to make an extra effort to connect with them outside of IB and stuff. But that's partially why I signed up for and activities and sports outside of school. I still wanted to maintain those relationships.
Yeah. And then one other thing, just that Nathaniel slightly touched on, I think it's important to note. I know a lot of people in and out of IB. I have an older sister, so I know a lot of people and seen them progress past high school too. And there's a lot of really great and amazing people who've gone really, really far without doing IB, even without doing AP classes. It's all about personally what's best for you and like what you bring to the table. It's also important that even if you're not being that model straight A student while you're in IB, it's definitely not a failure, and strictly looking at it from a college lens, it won't be seen as a failure on your part. There's a lot of understanding there, and just as long as you can personally try your best and be a full, well-rounded student, from both a college perspective and a life perspective, your students will be more than fine. They will do great things.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Yeah, go ahead, Nathaniel.
All right. One thing, maybe the most love about IB is it really does make you feel as a student. It makes you feel valued, because like Mr. Flater said, a lot of the classes are inquiry based and discussion based, and it allows you to have a voice and kind of guide your learning process. And it really does allow you to have express yourself and it allows you to make mistakes, grow together with everyone else. And so you really just do feel valued, and the teachers make you feel valued. And I love that about IB as well.
Great. I mean, I so appreciate you two both as students. I know our parents will probably have additional questions for you. Two things I do want to pull out from what I heard them say is that first and foremost, parents, this is something your students have to want. I think you heard both of them talk about how, Ellie said that you all are a team, but that team requires that this is led by students. And so it has to be something that your student wants. The other thing I really liked about is this idea that it teaches you these skills from all throughout. And we'll talk in a second about sort of the international aspect. So now sort of into the Q&A component, these are questions that were presented to us. I want to highlight there are two components of IB. There's IB prep at Druid Hills High School, and this is for 9th and 10th graders. So students are not taking IB diploma program courses in 9th and 10th grade. Students are taking courses that they, students are taking courses that all students get to take. And you're going to see that there are AP courses, there are accelerated courses. And then in 11th and 12th grade is when the IB diploma program begins. The IB diploma program is for 11th and 12th graders. IB prep is 9th through 10th. Both of these programs require completion of the school choice application, even if you are in attendance zone, and completion of the IB application. And so in order to get in, the requirement is to complete that process, which opens up in January. Once you're accepted all the way through. So if you're accepted as a 9th grader to the IB prep program, you are automatically part of the IB diploma program as long as you continue to qualify. A couple of other questions that we had. We always have lots of questions. What's the difference between AP, IB, dual enrollment? And here's my short, simple answer. I teach both AP. I teach AP Government and Politics. I've taught AP Government for a long time. I also teach IB. AP is a US-based program run by the College Board. It is available as a singular course. It is not an overall curriculum or an overall program. If your student is really strong in STEM, they can take AP Science and AP Math, but they don't have to take AP English and AP History. AP courses are available to all schools or all students in DCSD and at all schools. AP is not part of the school choice program. AP courses are available to students in 9th through 10th grade. And this last thing is important. You can take the AP exam without taking the course. I know several students and parents have asked, can my student take the AP Calc exam while they're in IB? And the answer is yes, you can take an AP exam without taking the course. IB is an internationally based program. So I think it's really important for you all to understand that one of the things that makes IB unique is that it is an international standard, and that the IB diploma is not just based off of your US peers, but it is a global standard for education. IB is 58 years old. There are over 2,000 schools offering IB programs in the US alone, let alone all of the programs that are international. And so because of that, there is a very broad range and a broad standard that exists. Hopefully you saw how IB is a framework for the entire curriculum, which is interdisciplinary. It is not a la carte. It is a part of school choice, and it is application-based. And IB is only available at those particular schools, the diploma program in 11th through 12th grade. The question of what do they both have in common? They're both rigorous. They're both college level courses. And with both, you have the ability to receive college credit depending on the score and depending on the college you go to. Couple of other good things, dual enrollment. So dual enrollment is simply taking college courses while also enrolled in high school. This is something you should consult your counselor and the colleges or universities for. I will tell you that when we hear from some of the most rigorous rigorous colleges and universities, what they like to see is that it is fundamentally the IB and the AP courses really are the most rigorous and most challenging. Here's an example of what 9th and 10th grade might look like. I do want to flag that you can take AP courses in 9th and 10th grade as an IB prep student. There are some requirements. So by 10th grade, you need to finish your 3rd language. And, you know, it's pretty simple in terms of what students take. 9th grade is almost exclusively semester-long courses. 10th grade, the AP courses become year-long, and so you have them every other day. An example of what the IB schedule looks like, you'll see that there are a lot more classes. You'll see that students are essentially taking 7 or 8 classes each semester, which means that they go to class every other day. And again, this idea that courses are 2 years, you'll see IB Math Year 1, IB Math Year 2, History of America, 20th Century History. Think of IB courses as 2-year-long courses for the vast majority. There is an opportunity to take an IB elective. I will say that this is all as of now. Depending on when your child takes IB courses, it could change throughout. But currently we offer IB Theater, IB Visual Arts, and IB Psychology as an elective. Another question we got was, what are the requirements to stay in IB? The big thing to say is the IB program is part of the school choice program. And so whatever Dekalb County says is the school choice guidelines to remain in, that's what must be followed. Currently, those are a GPA of 3.0 or higher, a 71 in all subjects, and to meet the promotion criteria throughout the year. DCSD could always change those, and so you should always look at the continuation requirements through the county. There was another question about the diploma and how students earn the diploma. And those diplomas are earned based off of the number of points you get on end of year exams, essentially your senior year. So there are 6 courses. We talked about those. At the end of the senior year, there's an exam that's worth 7 points. Essentially, there's 42 points possible. Students have to earn 24 or more, as well as completing those core requirements of TOK, the extended essay, and CAS. It's a little more complicated than that. There's no IB seal that you get initially. You actually don't know how you did until after graduation. And so, you know, students find out if they earned their IB diploma in June or July. And so it's after graduation, but that's how you earn your diploma. I'll open it up to other questions. Some of that may have been way too quick and you would like me to clarify some more. But I do want to see if you all have any questions. And Valerie, I'll sort of turn it to you.
Yep, thank you. So yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we can go through that from that way. And thank you all for that great presentation. Question, can you elaborate on what TOK is?
Yes, of course. Hi, Ms. Klontz. So TOK is a core class, and the aims and objectives really are around this idea of how do we know information, how do we consume knowledge, how do we utilize knowledge, and how do we share knowledge? So the way I describe it in 2 ways. One is that my job is to unteach this idea that there is an answer that you have to learn. And it's more about thinking critically and asking questions about how we know stuff. The other way that's a little easier to understand is we have one word for knowing in English. It's know. I know the War of 1812 happened on these dates. I know Picasso's purpose of interpreting art. I know 2 + 2 is 4. And that word know is the same, but how we know math and how we know history and how we know art is very, very different. And so it's a course that really looks at those key subjects of those key components of math, science, history, English, and really looks at how is knowledge constructed and how is knowledge shared. And to this idea of developing principled individuals, we really look at how is knowledge used. What responsibilities do we have as knowers of certain information? And so there are knowledge questions that are not about content, but about how we know things, which then become embedded throughout each of the courses. Ellie, Nathaniel, do you have a better way of describing?
Sure. I love TOK. It's one of those classes that makes your brain hurt in the best kind of way. I know I really love it for me because it's one of those classes that there's no right or wrong answer. It's very discussion based. You feel very interactive with the knowledge, but also it doesn't end when you walk out the doors of your classroom. You could be reading your math textbook and there will be, for IB, there will be sections that pop up connecting it back to TOK. This happens in all of the subjects, and you can really, the things you learn, they stick with you and they apply really well. Mr. Flater started one of my first units with him by being able to convince our entire class that 2 + 2 does not equal 4. We're talking a room full of overachiever, don't want to say nerds, but that type of students. He was able to convince us that 2 + 2 does not equal 4, and we just went from there, learning and discussing and debating each other in the best kind of way.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellie. Go ahead, Valerie.
Oh, yeah. So we're getting quite a few questions in. The first one was about dual enrollment. I think the crux of it is, can you do dual enrollment while doing IB?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on dual enrollment. Definitely talk to to your school, your counselor about that. There have been a lot of changes in Dekalb County. I'll say you cannot do dual enrollment and IB at the same time currently. There used to be a way to do that in the past. Ms. Bracewell, do you want to talk about that for a second?
Well, what I had put in is that it's very rare. It's been, an occasional exception where, say, the student was so far ahead in something that they were able to basically finish the IB level in the 11th grade. The one example I can think of right now was one of the students who was able to do that with math. But typically, if we have any students who have done a dual enrollment class, they've done it outside of regular school hours. It depends on the individual situation, but yeah, it's rare. We don't see it very often.
Okay. Next question. Are there historically slots available in 9th grade for students who are not zoned for DHHS and apply through school choice?
Yeah. So there are 2 classfuls worth of slots. So in a Ms. Bracewell, do you want to mute? Essentially there are about 64 slots. Our current senior class is 30. Our current junior class is about 48. I will say there are plenty of slots available for students who do not apply in 9th grade. And so, yes, there are absolutely slots available historically. Valerie, for the recording, it's probably good for you to read the questions out loud.
Yeah, I think so. So this one is, if students don't know whether they have the diploma, how does that affect their college admissions?
Yep. So most colleges obviously don't look at whether or not you've received the diploma. The diploma's value in particular is twofold. Number one, it's that intrinsic motivation. Remember, we talked about how what makes an IB student is that they have a love of learning. And so for many of our students, you will hear them say, this is the validation for all of the hard work I've done. In terms of colleges look at, one of the biggest questions is, have you taken the most rigorous coursework available your school? And Ellie and Nathaniel and their peers who are in the IB program, the answer is yes. And so for colleges, a lot of it is they value the learner profile characteristics. They value what students learn through IB, not necessarily did they attain that diploma or not. So they look at the whole child, but for IB, they look at, did you take the courses? How were your grades in those courses, et cetera. With the caveat of, I'm not a college admissions counselor and they may have different answers. So.
Okay, so the next question is about student diversity and what that looks like at the high school's program.
Yeah, so I'll say that's an area that we've done a really poor job of. The IB program does not represent the school as a whole. I have the statistics as of the beginning of this year, and I'm happy to share those out at a later date. I want to say that it is 55% white, around 30% African-American. It changes based off of the year. I think what this highlights is two things. Number one is I think there's a perception that IB is right for only a certain type of student. I don't mean racially, but I think in terms of the skills that they have. And hopefully one of the things we're doing is we're starting to have people understand that IB is for everyone. IB actually has an equity statement, and they have a policy that fundamentally says all students are IB students. And we know that is a fact from kindergarten through 8th grade. The other thing is, as coordinators, we're doing a lot more in terms of reaching out to our middle schools, reaching out to students who have not yet applied, reaching out to other high schools. We fundamentally believe that what makes an International Baccalaureate program amazing is the diversity of students. And so hopefully we'll see those statistics and numbers change as the years go on.
Next question, if a child comes into 9th grade for IB prep, can they decide junior year not to do IB?
You can. The caveat is, your child is taking up a seat. And so if your student fundamentally believes that IB is not right for them, the equitable and principled thing to do is to not save that slot. By the time 11th grade begins, it is too late to join the IB program. And so what we really like to see is that students who commit to the program follow through with the program. That being said, a lot of times I say, Druid Hills High School is amazing. We have so many great opportunities, and it's a lot like dating. You got to figure out what's right for you. And you may be in a relationship with the IB program for a semester or two and realize that it's not the right fit for you. And I think Ellie and Nathaniel did a really good job of saying that you got to figure out what's right for your student. So the short answer is yes, you can, remove yourself from the program and find a better fit for you.
The next question is about IB math, and it is, if you take AP Calc as a sophomore, what is left for IB math in 11th and 12th grades?
So 11th and 12th grade is just called IB math. And IB math is a collection of all of the math topics, algebra, geometry, calculus, statistics. And so IB Math Year 1 and IB Math Year 2 combines all of the different aspects of math, and you learn and apply and use conceptual understanding and inquiry-based instruction to do that.
Okay, now this one's about the language requirement. If my 8th grader won't take a language class until 9th grade, this means they won't meet the 3 classes by end of sophomore year. So would they not be eligible for IB then?
So your student would remember that 9th and 10th grade courses are semester long. So sometimes what we will see is that a student will take French 1 first semester 9th grade, French 2 second semester 9th grade, French 3 second semester sophomore year. So remember that courses in 9th and 10th grade are not year long, so you're able to do 3 courses. That being said, when the application pulls up, really keep an eye out on what those requirements are. In addition, if you have a student transferring in and they only finish French 2 by their end of the sophomore year, there's always the option of taking summer school so that you have French 3 or Spanish 3, so that by the beginning of your junior year, you're ready for foreign language 4.
Okay, and then the last one for now is if orchestra, is orchestra one of the electives? If you're in IB?
Orchestra is not one of the electives when you are in the diploma program. As an IB prep student, depending on what your different scheduling options are, we see a lot of students who are able to take electives like orchestra or others in 9th and 10th grade. But in 11th and 12th grade, unless things change in terms of how the schedule is at Druid Hills High School, it's not an IB course. And the diploma program really requires that you were taking those IB classes.
Okay, and we've had another one come in. If a student in 10th grade has a problem with GPA and is not zoned for Druid Hills, what are his or her chances of getting in the program?
So the question, there's sort of two different components of that. So first, students who join the IB program out of attendance zone attend Druid Hills High School because they are an IB prep student. And so if an out of attendance zone student is attending Druid Hills High School, they are already in the program. So it's not a question of what's their chances of getting into the program. At the heart of the question is this question of sometimes students struggle, right? And I really highlighted, hopefully, that part of being reflective is understanding that there are strengths and weaknesses. One of the things that we do as coordinators is we really work with students who are struggling academically, identifying what's the challenge, helping them through this process of learning. I have a lot of meetings with parents and students where I'm working on developing those skills that help them become balanced. So we develop, how do you break a big task into smaller things? The DCSD continuation requirement or continuation guidelines say that if a student doesn't meet the requirements, they're then put on probation, not as a punishment, but as a way for us to provide support. And so if a student doesn't meet the requirements in one semester, we provide wraparound support services to help them rise to the occasion, because again, we fundamentally believe that all students can achieve, and so we help them develop those skills.
Okay, and then we've had another one come in. Does IB count as a pathway?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what the counselor's technical definitions of a pathway is.
I do, it does.
Great, perfect.
I'm glad, because I didn't know that one either, so.
Yeah, IB, there's certain graduation requirements for course rigor and for a pathway, and IB encompasses those as its own sort of thing.
Okay, another question came in. Can a student be enrolled in the Fernbank STT program in 9th grade spring semester while still being involved in the IB prep program?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, many or a handful of my AP 9th graders will be in Fernbank whatever it is, STT program. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I did that as well, and it's entirely possible and a great program.
Okay. Any other last call for questions?
As we go to that last call, I do want to highlight, this is a lot of information. You might have more detailed questions. You might have a desire to talk about your individual students' strengths or their situations. If you have questions about recommendations, the joint email address that Ms. Bracewell and I both share is ibcoordinator.dhhs@dekabschoolsga.org. One of our responsibilities is to interact with you all. And we genuinely love talking about the IB program and really figuring out whether it's a right fit for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us, to contact us. If you email that address, we'll both get it. You can also feel free to reach out to us individually. But we would love to share more details and talk about the unique aspects of your child.
Okay, and we did have one other question come in. It was about taking Fernbank Science Center classes in 12th grade if you're in the IB program. Can you do both of those?
Ellie, you're the perfect person to talk about this.
Yes, the answer is yes, because I have done a Fernbank Science Center course both years of IB. I will say junior year, there's technically not like a slot in your schedule for it. So it won't show on your schedule that you're in that class. But you still can do it. I know I left my 4th period classes 2 days of the week. You leave maybe 10-15 minutes early from class to get there. 12th grade is the same. Hopefully you'll get a parking spot. You should be able to as part of that. As an issue at our school. But it is very much possible if you're willing. At that point, you're taking 7 or 8 classes in one semester. It's difficult, but I believe in you. I did it, so I think you can.
Yes. Now, whether you all can solve the parking issues, that's a whole other conundrum, right? So.
Yes.
Okay, well, it looks like that's it. I just wanted to thank the panelists all again, and then thank all of our participants who joined, who came tonight, who sent questions, asked questions. I think this is a really great opportunity to learn a lot. I've been going to these for a couple of years, and I always learn something new too. So it's really great. So thank you all so much, everyone who participated.
Thank you all so much. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're really excited to chat with you all.
Can I just say something really quick too?
Of course.
I did just see a question in the chat about GPA and out of attendance area. And so for any of those situations, I'd say go ahead and just email me tomorrow. And we can set up a time to talk, because all of those kind of need to be handled individually when I can see exactly what's going on with the student.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. Okay, well, thank you again, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your evening.